It was just another sunny Tuesday at the Ellen DeGeneres Show studio in Burbank. The familiar blue and white lights cast their warm glow across the stage, and the audience was buzzing with anticipation for another episode filled with Ellen's signature blend of humor, dancing, and heartwarming surprises. But nobody in that studio, not the producers, not the camera crew, not even Ellen herself, knew they were about to witness something that would change everything they thought they knew about communication, patience, and the power of simply being heard. The day had started like any other. Ellen danced her way onto the stage to thunderous applause. Her energy, infectious as always. She wore a crisp navy blazer over a white shirt, her short blonde hair perfectly styled, that megawatt smile lighting up the entire studio. The audience was a sea of faces, all eager to be part of the magic that happened daily on this stage. "Welcome, welcome, welcome," Ellen called out, her voice carrying easily across the studio. "We've got an amazing show for you today. We're going to play some games, give away some prizes, and I have a feeling something really special is going to happen. I can just feel it." She couldn't have known how prophetic those words would be. In the third row, section B, seat 7, sat a woman named Sarah Martinez. She was 34, a kindergarten teacher from Phoenix, Arizona, with gentle brown eyes that held both infinite love and a weariness that only parents of special needs children truly understand. Beside her, fidgeting with a small blue toy car, was her 5-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan Martinez was beautiful in the way that children are beautiful, pure, unguarded, completely himself. He had thick, dark hair that never seemed to stay combed, warm brown eyes that saw the world differently than most, and small hands that moved in patterns only he understood. He wore a light blue polo shirt and khaki pants that his mother had carefully selected, hoping they would help him feel comfortable in this new, overwhelming environment. Ethan had never spoken. Not mama, not dada, not even a cephal no or yes. In 5 years of life, he had remained silent in a world that often equated silence with absence, quiet with emptiness. But Sarah knew better. She knew that behind those watchful eyes was a mind that processed everything, a heart that felt deeply, and a spirit that was just waiting for the right moment, the right connection to find its voice. The reason they were here today was both simple and extraordinary. 3 months ago, Sarah had been watching The Ellen Show with Ethan during their daily afternoon routine. Usually, Ethan would play with his toys while the television provided background noise. He seemed to enjoy the music and lights, but rarely paid direct attention to what was happening on screen. But that particular Tuesday, something changed. Ellen was interviewing a young dancer, and as she spoke, Ethan stopped playing. He looked up at the screen, really looked, with an intensity Sarah had never seen before. When Ellen laughed, Ethan smiled. When Ellen's voice grew softer and more empathetic, Ethan moved closer to the television. For the entire segment, he was transfixed. From that day forward, Ethan's relationship with The Ellen Show became something Sarah couldn't quite explain, but couldn't ignore. Every afternoon at 3 p.m., Ethan would position himself in front of the television and wait. She ended the letter with a simple request. "I don't know if meeting Ellen would help Ethan find his voice, but I have to try. Sometimes I feel like he has so much to say. And maybe, just maybe, Ellen is the key to helping him say it." 2 weeks later, Sarah's phone rang. Now, sitting in that studio, surrounded by hundreds of people and bright lights and noise that would typically overwhelm even, Sarah watched her son with amazement. He was calm, more than calm. He was alert, engaged, waiting. His little hands were still, his eyes fixed on the stage where Ellen was bantering with the audience about their weekend plans. "You know what I love about Tuesdays? Ellen was saying, walking closer to the audience section where Sarah and Ethan sat. Tuesdays have this energy, this possibility. Like anything could happen. Anyone could surprise you. As Ellen spoke, something extraordinary occurred. Ethan stood up. In 5 years of crowded places, overwhelming sensory experiences, and unfamiliar environments, Ethan had never willingly stood up to get a better view of anything. He was a child who typically sought the quietest corner, the most predictable routine, the safest space. But here, in this studio filled with hundreds of strangers, he stood up because he wanted to see Ellen more clearly. Ellen noticed immediately. She had that gift, that ability, to spot the one person in a crowd who needed to be seen. Her eyes found Ethan, this small boy standing among seated adults, his face turned up toward her with an expression of pure focus. "Well, hello there," Ellen said, her voice naturally shifting to the gentler tone she used with children. "What's your name, sweetie?" The studio fell quiet, waiting for Ethan's response. Sarah felt her heart clench. This was the moment she both hoped for and feared. Ethan looked at Ellen, his eyes locked on hers, but no words came. Sarah started to stand, ready to explain, to protect her son from the potential embarrassment of silence in front of all these people. But Ellen raised a gentle hand, her instincts telling her that something important was happening here. "That's okay," Ellen said softly, never breaking eye contact with Ethan. "Sometimes words aren't ready yet. Sometimes they're just waiting for exactly the right moment." She walked closer, descending the few steps that separated the stage from the audience. The cameras followed her, but the usual energy of the show had shifted into something quieter, more intimate. "You know what I think," Ellen continued, now standing just a few feet from Ethan. "I think you have a lot to say. I can see it in your eyes. Really important things, probably. And when you're ready, when the words are ready, they're going to be amazing." Ethan's mother watched in wonder as her son, who typically avoided eye contact with strangers, maintained his steady gaze on Ellen. His hands, usually in constant motion, were still. His body, usually tense in new environments, was relaxed. "Can I tell you a secret?" Ellen whispered, leaning down so she was closer to Ethan's height. "Sometimes I'm scared of words, too. Sometimes I worry they won't come out right, or that people won't understand what I really mean." She glanced up at Sarah, seeking permission with her eyes. Sarah nodded, tears already beginning to form. "Your mom told me something really special about you," Ellen continued, her voice carrying that particular warmth she reserved for moments that mattered most. "She told me that when you hear my voice, something changes, something good. Is that true?" Ethan nodded. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but it was there. His first response, his first communication with Ellen, with anyone outside his immediate family in such a direct way. The audience held its breath. Even the camera operators seemed to lean in closer. "That makes me feel really honored," Ellen said. And the emotion in her voice was completely genuine, because do you know what? When I look at you, something changes in me too. Something really good. This is when Ellen made the decision that would define not just this episode, but the way she approached every interaction with children for the rest of her career. She stood up slowly and walked back to the center of the stage, but instead of continuing with her planned show, instead of moving on to the next segment, she stopped. The studio lights seemed to dim slightly, or maybe it was just that everyone's attention had focused so completely on this one moment that everything else faded away. "You know what, everybody?" Ellen announced to the studio. "I think we need to change our plans for today. I think we need to slow down. I think we need to remember that sometimes the most important conversations happen without words." She gestured to the production team. "Can we bring a chair out here? Just a simple chair? Within moments, a crew member had placed a child-sized chair in the center of the stage. Ellen walked back to Ethan, and with a gentle question in her eyes, she extended her hand. "Would you like to come up here with me?" No talking required, just sitting, just being. Sarah felt her throat tighten. This was what they had hoped for, but never dared to expect. Ellen wasn't trying to force Ethan to perform or speak or be anything other than exactly who he was. Ethan looked at Ellen's outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, in a movement that seemed to surprise even him, he reached out and took it. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, but Ellen quickly raised her free hand to quiet them. She understood instinctively that this moment needed gentleness, not celebration. Not hand in hand, Ellen and Ethan walked to the center of the stage. The bright studio lights, which typically energized Ellen's performances, now seemed to create a sacred space around them. Ethan sat in the small chair, and Ellen knelt beside him, bringing herself to his eye level. "Comfortable?" she asked, softly. Ethan nodded again, this time more clearly. "Good. Now, here's what I'm thinking," Ellen said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent studio. "I'm thinking that maybe we don't need to talk at all. Maybe we just need to sit here and understand each other." She paused, looking directly into Ethan's eyes. "Because here's something I've learned in all my years of talking for a living. The most important things we say to each other don't always use words." The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. Ellen reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone. Something she carried as a good luck charm, a reminder to stay grounded. "This is my worry stone," she told Ethan, holding it out for him to see. "When I'm nervous or scared, or when words feel too big, I hold this, and it helps me remember that I'm okay just as I am." Ethan looked at the stone with curiosity. Without thinking, without prompting, he reached out and gently touched it with one finger. "Would you like to hold it?" Ellen asked. Ethan nodded and carefully took the stone in his small palm. For several moments, they sat together in companionable silence. Ellen kneeling beside Ethan's chair, Ethan examining the smooth surface of the stone with intense concentration. "You know what I think this stone is telling you," Ellen said. "Eventually, I think it's saying that you're perfect exactly as you are. Whether you use words or not, whether you speak today or tomorrow or next year or never, you're perfect." And then something extraordinary happened. Something that would be replayed millions of times on social media, written about in articles, and remembered by everyone in that studio for the rest of their lives. Ethan looked up from the stone and directly into Ellen's eyes. For a moment that seemed to stretch infinitely, they simply looked at each other. And then, in a voice so quiet that the microphones barely caught it, so clear that every person in the studio heard it, Ethan spoke his first words. "Thank you." The studio exploded, but it wasn't the usual explosive applause of a game show audience. It was something deeper, a collective gasp of wonder, followed by tears, followed by applause that came from the deepest places of recognition and joy. Ellen's own tears came immediately. She brought her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Sarah was sobbing in her seat, her hands pressed to her heart. But Ethan wasn't finished. Still looking directly at Ellen, still holding her worry stone, he spoke again. "Ellen," he said, the word clear and deliberate, kind. The cameras caught it all. Ellen's face transforming from surprise to pure joy, the audience rising to their feet, Sarah rushing onto the stage to embrace her son. But mostly, they caught the look in Ethan's eyes, a look of recognition, of connection, of a child who had found his voice in the safest possible space. Ellen stood up and gently embraced both Ethan and his mother. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan. "Thank you for trusting me with your first words." As the three of them stood together in the center of the stage, something had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just a television show anymore. It had become a moment of pure human connection, a reminder that communication comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most profound conversations happen when we least expect them. The rest of the show was unlike anything The Ellen Show had ever aired. Ellen abandoned her planned segments entirely. Instead, she sat with Ethan and Sarah, not conducting an interview, but simply being present. She asked Ethan no questions, made no demands. She just let him exist in this space where his voice had found its home. Ethan spoke twice more during that taping. Once to say blue when Ellen pointed to the blue lights around the studio, and once to say music when the band played a soft melody. Each word was a gift, freely given, celebrated, but not demanded. When the show ended, Ellen made a promise to Sarah that she would keep for years to come. "This isn't goodbye," she said. "This is just the beginning. Ethan has found his voice here, and this will always be a place where he can use it." 3 months later, Ethan spoke his first full sentence, "I want to see Ellen." 6 months after that, he spoke his first paragraph during a video call with Ellen, describing in his own words how it felt to hear his own voice for the first time. Today, Ethan is in second grade in a mainstream classroom with support services. He loves to read aloud and often requests to call Ellen on special occasions. His vocabulary grows daily, but he still carries Ellen's worry stone in his pocket, a reminder of the day words became his friend. The episode became the most watched in Ellen's history, but more importantly, it changed how people think about autism, communication, and the many different ways we connect with each other. Ellen received thousands of letters from parents of nonverbal children, thanking her for showing the world that silence doesn't mean absence, and that sometimes the most powerful words are the ones we wait for. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from Ethan himself, in a letter he dictated to his mother a year later. "Dear Ellen, thank you for waiting for my words. Thank you for showing me that my voice was always there. Love, Ethan." Ellen keeps that letter framed in her dressing room, a daily reminder that sometimes the most important thing a host can do is stop hosting and start listening. Because in the space between words, in the patience between question-answer, in the trust between stranger and child, magic happens. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to witness a voice finding its home. When Ellen's voice filled the room, something in Ethan would shift. His stimming behaviors would calm. His eye contact, usually fleeting, would focus on the screen. It was as if Ellen's voice had found a frequency that resonated with something deep inside him. After weeks of watching this daily transformation, Sarah made a decision that felt both desperate and hopeful. She wrote a letter to The Ellen Show, not asking for anything, just sharing Ethan's story. She described her son's autism, his silence, and this inexplicable connection he seemed to have with Ellen's voice.